Good evening and welcome back to Sudden Wealth. Today, a quick market update. The tech stocks and the S&P rallied back from support, and today they're pretty much flat, a little bit to the downside. Some indexes a bit up, some indexes a bit down. Where are we in the major, let's call it the major trend, if you will? I actually believe that we are going to see new all-time highs, at least in the S&P, Nasdaq, and the Dow. I think by early 2024, the latest. So I would say Q1, right around the Bitcoin halving actually. And the Russell is a bit harder to say because number one, it has companies which are more impacted by the by slowdowns in the economy, by rising interest rates, but also by the regional banks, which have been hammered over the past year. However, the big three, if you will, I do think they're gonna hit all-time highs, the latest, meaning can come earlier, by Q1 2024. Now, that is my prediction, and you guys will tell me by that time if I'm right or wrong. Most people still, the world is ending, recession confirmed, all the banks are projecting recessions, etc. As I mentioned before, when this is the case, that means it's not going to happen. Now, what's going to trigger the new all-time highs? Maybe some good news from Ukraine, maybe continuous inflation readings going down, particularly because the inflation is red over the last 12 months. So it's almost impossible that it's not going to go down, because the other 12 months, because the previous 12 months, because there were high numbers, it's now easier to showcase lower increases because your base is higher. So what I'm trying to say is something of this nature. Let's say you're comparing something to the number 50, or you're comparing something to the number 100. So it's easier that you're going to show a smaller increase versus 100 than versus 50. Same thing with the CPI, okay? So I don't know what's going to be. I do believe we're going to have new all-time highs. And this is a bit of a longer prediction, but what I think is going to happen is, since we're going to see new all-time highs, a lot of institutions and retail, by the way, will jump in after we break the new all-time highs. So I think that once we cross, let's say, the 4,800 on the S&P, I would not be surprised to see something like a quick ramp up to 5,500, 6,000, something very aggressive. And then by 2025 or so, maybe a bit earlier, I wouldn't expect to see a major crash, I'd say 50% plus. And you would have, let's say, a sideways decade for the 2020 to 2030 in the US stock market. Now, this is something that people tend to forget. The US stock market completely obliterated international stocks from 2010 to 2020. Why? Well, because if you look at 1999 to 2009, the market went nowhere. It was pretty much the same in 1999 versus 2009. In the case of the Nasdaq, was actually worse. So basically, you had the dead decade from 2000 to 2010. Seems like a huge, a millennia ago, right? But then in the 80s, the US underperformed part of the decade. In the 70s, I think all markets were actually quite bad. But in the 80s, it kind of underperformed the international, particularly Japanese stocks. My God, the 80s was all about Japan. And then in the 90s, the US outperformed everything again. And then the 2000s underperformed and basically went nowhere. 2010s overperformed everything. 2020s, you see the point. I think we are actually going to end up pretty much on a sideways decade. So this is a bit of a more longer period prediction. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. But I do believe that we have all the ingredients for a new all-time high by March 2024, the latest. Maybe even 2023, we'll see. But remember, I'm saying this right now, when everyone is talking about recessions, market crashes, depressions 2.0, you name it, I'm saying it right now. So we will see who's right or wrong. As for gold, I mentioned last week, I said gold was around 1930 or something like that. And I said gold will go to 1850, between 1850 and 1860. It's now below 1910. So I do think we're gonna start moving towards 1850 to 1860. I said, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at the most by the end of July, we're gonna see that number. And then it's gonna be a crucial point for gold. Is it gonna find support and go straight up? Or is it gonna break support and continue below 1800? I don't know. That needs to be seen. It's impossible to say at the moment. I do expect to see some support, but if the support is very weak, not good news for gold. Particularly as the Bitcoin ETF is coming out, maybe people will start really thinking about Bitcoin as digital gold, which means gold should lose even more of its thunder. But we will see on that. It's too early to tell. But 1850, it seemed obvious when it was 1930, like I mentioned last week. So now it's below 1910. And particularly if we close out the week below 1900, that's very bearish. So we'll see. 1850 to 1860 by the end of July, the maximum. We'll see if I'm right about that one as well. In any case, guys, please remember this is not financial advice, just my predictions or what I think is going to happen. And you guys can be the judges if what I'm saying is correct or if I'm completely wrong. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.